for the first Cities with Nature webinar for 2022 to launch the new action platform. Always very exciting. I am Jessica Robbins, the ICLEI Oceania Partnerships and Programs Manager, also joined by Dustin Cutler, our Marketing and Memberships Officer, who's organising the Zoom and tech and all of us today. So that's great. Thanks, Dustin. Just to, before we kick off, and I introduce you to Steve Gawler, our Regional Director, I also just wanted to give you a little bit of guidance in case you're amazingly not yet familiar with Zoom. Just as you would have seen, we have started recording this session. We will make this recording available after the event. We do, of course, encourage you to keep your cameras on just to encourage some social connection and give that bit of feedback to our wonderful speakers today. But do ask that you do stay muted throughout the event, unless, of course, you're invited to ask a question and do so that way. Of course, later on when we are doing questions, do raise your hand electronically, which is as part of the features under the More section, or alternatively just raise your hand like this, and hopefully we will see you, but the electronic one is preferable. If you do have any technical difficulties, do feel free just to message me or Dustin directly in the chat and we'll try and sort that out for you. We have Dustin's email here as well. We will also capture a few photos during this event, so do feel free to switch your camera off, of course, if you would not like your image to be shared. However, we would like to invite you straight away to have a group photo that we will then be able to use in our social media, etc., like that. So if you don't mind all putting your hands up and just giving me a little bit of a wave, and Dustin can capture the people online. So thanks very much. I think you got a shot, did you, Dustin?
Got it. Thanks. Thanks all.
Excellent. Fabulous. Excellent. All right. So now just hand over to Steve Gawler, who is the Regional Director for ICLEI Oceania and leading on the Cities with Nature. So Steve.
Great. Thanks, Jessica, and hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome along to this session this afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri land where I'm based here in Melbourne, and pay our respects to the elders of the Kulin Nation, the past, present and emerging, and to all the traditional owners from the other places represented today. First, I'd like to just run through the program. So Dustin, can you throw up the second slide for us? Thank you. Yeah, just the next one. Okay, thanks. So we're going to start off with a brief introduction from Councillor Amanda Stone, who's the chair of our executive committee and also one of the advisors on nature to ICLEI Global. And then we hand over to Peter from Africa, from our Africa office, and a fair chunk of the first half hour will be walking us through the platform, the Cities with Nature website, and in particular this new platform. There will be an opportunity for probably a couple of questions at the end of Peter's demonstration, just in case anyone wants to ask, like a technical thing about how to use the action platform. Then we'll move on to 3 cities, snapshots from 3 cities who we hope will be some of the first sort of pioneers to start putting their information up on the platform. So Melbourne, West Torrens and Wollongong. And then we'll open it up at the end. And traditionally with our Cities with Nature webinar, we try to have a fairly unstructured session towards the end where people who are interested can make a bit of a comment, a bit of an intervention, can offer some examples, case studies, ask questions, etc. We'll manage that as best we can, and we will stay online past the hour. So if you'd like to stay on for another 15, 20 minutes, we're very happy to facilitate a conversation. So look, that's the way we're going to run. His structured program will be over well and truly before 5, and then we'll keep rolling according to people's interests. So I'm very happy to now hand over to Councillor Stone, who, as I said, is our chair. She's a special advisor to the ICLEI Global Executive Committee on Nature and Biodiversity, but she's basically a great champion for nature in the cities. So Amanda, over to you, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon to everyone. I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thanks everyone for joining us today to learn about the new Cities with Nature action platform. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's something we've been waiting for a while, and the timing couldn't be better really. There's talks underway at the moment to advance the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and COP15 is coming up part 2 in September in Kunming, China, where hopefully this framework will be adopted. The process to develop the framework, a 10-year framework, has been underway for some time, and the role of local government has featured strongly in it. The framework comprises 21 targets and 10 milestones, which are proposed for 2030. And the whole framework's leading to a goal of living in harmony with nature by 2050. It adopts a whole of government approach, which recognises multi-level governance, all levels of government working together in our ideal world. And it specifically recognises the need for support from cities and subnational governments in implementing the framework, as well as a whole of society approach. And the framework also includes a means of implementation in line with the Convention on Biological Diversity, with mechanisms for monitoring, reporting and review. So there's accountability built into this framework, and this is where the role of local government is going to be really key. But the framework has to be adopted first, and some of you may have read that there have been talks in Geneva recently which didn't quite get where everyone hoped they would get. There wasn't agreement yet on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to take to COP15, so further talks are scheduled for June. But good progress was made on the paper, the conference room paper on engagement with subnational governments. This is one of the few papers that actually came out better, stronger and improved from these talks. So it's really positive, and the role of local governments are going to be key in implementing the new framework, and will make it for the second time the only multilateral environmental agreement with a consistent 10-year plan for the engagement of subnational governments, cities and other local authorities. So it's special. So what's the role of the action platform? Well, the Convention on Biological Diversity recognises the Cities with Nature action platform in its plan of action as the place where cities will monitor and report on their voluntary commitments to national and global biodiversity targets. It translates the global biodiversity framework into commitments that cities and municipalities are willing to make voluntarily with targets that are appropriate to their local context. It also helps cities to gather and municipalities to gather information to feed into their own country's national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and help their countries, or our country here, to achieve our national priorities and report to the UN's Convention on Biological Diversity. And how important that is can be seen in the experience of local governments who have been measuring and reporting on emission reductions. Last year, ICLEI commissioned a report which demonstrated that if they were supported properly to achieve their emissions targets, local governments could largely meet our national commitments under the Paris Agreement. And this was demonstrated through the systematic reporting and recording by local governments on their emission reductions using credible platforms like the Global Covenant of Mayors. And this demonstration has become a really powerful lever in seeking a partnership with our national government to adopt that multi-level governance approach and do more. So the Cities with Nature action platform goes one step further as the recognised reporting platform by the Convention. It's got great potential. So you're here because you are committed through your work to the importance of nature to all of us. And that's, of course, been underlined by this week's latest IPCC report. I hope you find today's session helpful, and I hope that using the action platform supports your work in protecting and enhancing nature in your municipality to benefit your communities and contributing to the global goal of living in harmony with nature by 2050.
Thank you very
That's
much.
it.
Thanks, Amanda. That was great. Really set the context very well. Local action for global impact. So having set the context like that, we're now going to move across to Peter Botta from our Africa office. And the way it's set up is ICLEI has offices in a number of regions all around the world. It's our Africa office based in Cape Town, which is the home of Cities with Nature. They basically built the program, they built the platform, they managed the platform for us. So Peter's job title, it's a good one, Global Coordinator, Cities with Nature and also Regions with Nature of the Cities Biodiversity Centre. And as we said before, the Cities Biodiversity Centre is an ICLEI entity and it sits alongside the ICLEI regional office in Africa. And I noticed too, we've now been joined by the director of that centre, Ingrid, and Ingrid may make some comments a little bit further in the program too. But Peter, over to you. We're looking forward to the demonstration. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Steve, and thank you, Councillor Sloan, for the introduction. And thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to be sharing the Cities with Nature Action Platform with you today. So won't give any further introduction. Thank you for the introduction, Steve, and jump straight into showing you first a quick general overview of the Cities with Nature Action Platform, of the Cities with Nature site overall. And then I will dive specifically into the action platform and walk you through that and do a live demonstration of that. So let me just share my screen. Great, can you all see my screen fine?
Yep, we can see you, Peter.
Yep, we can see it, thanks. Yep.
Okay, great. Yes, so this is the landing page of Cities with Nature, and Cities with Nature is
Peter, actually, I can only see your desktop.
On the wrong screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just swap that around. Sorry.
Although I do like your desktop.
A sky full of bats. That's not what we wanted. Apologies for that. One moment. Sorry for the glitch there. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, perfect. So, like I mentioned, Cities with Nature is a global initiative, a partnership initiative. So, led by ICLEI, but also involves other partner organizations like WWF, UNEP, IUCN, and others. And the overall goal of Cities with Nature is to be a platform to share knowledge and inspiration and ideas across cities from around the world on really how to integrate nature and all its diversity into the fabric of cities, into the way we plan cities, we design them, we live in them, for both for people and biodiversity, and for flourishing, happy, healthy cities. So there are a number of different parts of the overall Cities with Nature website. And I'll start off just by showing you very quickly, this is where you land on the homepage. And just to mention quickly, it's over 200 cities already from 61 different countries and growing all the time. We have a newsletter called the Cities with Nature Buzz that I think many of you are subscribed to, so that goes out every month. Then, of course, we have updates about important events, including this webinar that we're at today. And just to give you a quick view of the spread around the world, it's cities from all over. So we have from every continent, cities that have joined Cities with Nature and that are contributing. And then one of the main places where a city showcases what they're doing on the platform is with their city profile. So I'll start off by showing you quickly a city profile. So if we look at Barcelona in Spain, just as one example, there is general information about the city, and this is what the city themselves can choose what information they provide here. Something about the mayor or the head of government, the setting and priorities of the local government, and then also pictures that showcase some of the nature that the city is proud of, so some of their natural features. There is also then ability to share on your city profile various kinds of media and data and resources. So similar to how one might post on Facebook, for example, you'll see there's facility to share links, share updates about what nature work you're doing, what documents you're sharing, videos, different media that you're able to share. If we then look at what is called the journey here, it's called the nature pathway. So it's one of the ICLEI methodologies for mainstreaming nature in your city. So it's really a roadmap to mainstream nature throughout all the different aspects of your city. So what we're seeing here is what steps Barcelona themselves have taken. And you see there are 3 different phases here, 9 different steps, and then various smaller steps below that. So this is just an overview of what Barcelona has done. But if we then go into the homepage of the Nature Pathway, you can see here there's this wheel methodology of the different steps that you can go through. And in each of them, you have guidance to help you to conceptualize what are good things to do at this step. And it's really based on long years of experience in ICLEI for how does one effectively mainstream nature in a city's way of doing. So just to show you one example quickly, for example, first off, of course, it's vital to have commitment and mobilization. And here, if we look at one of the first steps, secure an initial commitment, there's guidance about what it means, why it's important, what are good ways to go about it. You have access to different resources that help you to conceptualize this or take the steps. For example, here we see that City of Melbourne's Nature in the City strategy is held up as one of the global examples that other cities can learn from around the world. And then you have this for each of the different steps. It might, next step could be to analyze your institutional structures and instruments. Similarly, then further on, you might go on to develop your strategy. And the last thing I'll mention just about the nature pathway is that, of course, different cities have progressed further or less far along the pathway. So you're able to start, perhaps many cities and many of you that have joined today already have strong political mobilization and have capacity. So you might skip the analyze phase and go straight into the act phase and start looking at the guidance there, or start looking at what are useful steps to upscale your initiative, for example. So that's the nature pathway, and it does two things. On the one hand, it's guidance and global best practices that it shares, but you're also able on the nature pathway to share some of your own documents, which then show up on your city profile. So what I showed previously, where over here on the city's profile, this is showing some of the documents that Barcelona have shared. For example, they've shared an assessment of biodiversity conservation status under research and assess. So that, in short, is the nature pathway. Another component of Cities with Nature is the Tools and Resources Hub. And what the Tools and Resources Hub is really a curated library of best and most relevant reports, toolkits, guidelines, etc., from around the world. So you are able to search across different themes. It covers governance, health and social well-being, climate change, biodiversity, built environment, business, economics, finances. And again, as a city that is part of Cities with Nature, you're able to also share your own tools and resources here. So something that your city has developed that you'd like to share with the world or to showcase. And you're also able to search by different themes, locations, different tags. Like I mentioned, upload a resource of your own. This is the interface for that. And that's the Tools and Resources Hub in short. And then just to show you also quickly some of the lovely general communications that we have on Cities with Nature, really inspiring materials about imagining a city of the future. So it might be a bit slow sharing, but essentially this is a really rich poster with different aspects and really emphasizing the point of inspiration and imagination and really being bold in conceptualizing the kind of cities that we want to be building. I think at this stage, I'll switch over to Action Platform. And linking up to the great introduction from Steve and Councillor Stone, the Cities with Nature Action Platform is closely tied to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and particularly recognized in the Plan of Action for cities and local governments underneath that. And what the Action Platform does is it helps you as a city in the first place to orient and to understand these global nature goals that are coming out of the CBD process. So the new global post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and particularly underneath that there are the 2030 action targets. And those are, like Councillor Stone mentioned, the 21 different targets globally that we all want to work towards. And what the Action Platform does is interpret those targets and translate them into practical goals and actions and targets that make sense at the local level. So it's a way to align what your city is doing with the global goals and to show how you're contributing. And also by sharing on the Cities with Nature Action Platform, you are able to showcase some of your work, and that has various benefits. Of course, you get international recognition on this platform and the credibility of associating with the platform and with the global efforts of partners of that platform, like the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNEP's World Conservation Monitoring Center, to mention two. So that just some background information. What we're looking at here is the landing page. You can see that already just soon after the launch now, there are 12 cities participating, and they've taken over 100 actions. And then you get an overview of the different actions that cities have taken, which cities are taking part, and also just general information on why all of this matters, which I already talked about. So I think I'll start off by walking you through just an overview of the different parts of the action platform. So if we go on, learn more about the action platform, some general orienting information, like I mentioned, the link between the Convention on Biological Diversity, and specifically they have an important initiative that they call the Sharm el-Sheikh to Kunming Action Agenda for Nature and People. And that really is a platform that gathers commitments to the CBD and to the nature goals from across different stakeholders. So not cities, but civil society, indigenous peoples, business, industry, etc. And from our Cities with Nature Action Platform, we also link with this CBD initiative. So what I'd like to show you is an overview of the different parts of the action platform before I dive into the interface and walk you through the steps. So there are 4 different levels to the action platform. The first one is an action area, and there are 3 of them: protect and restore nature, use nature sustainably, and develop tools and solutions. And these 3 action areas are aligned with how the post-2020 global biodiversity framework is divided into different parts. So it's, in a sense, you navigate to which part you want to start with. Then the second step is to make a commitment. For example, our city commits to protect, connect, and restore ecosystems. And this is a general commitment to say that this is an important area for us as a city. This is what we're working on, and we're politically committed to achieve this. But it's not yet going into any specific details. Then once you've made a specific commitment, underneath that commitment, you can then go on to the next level, which is taking a specific action. And here you then get more specific and say, okay, how will we give effect to this commitment we've made? One action that we'll take is to increase protected areas. Another action might be to say we are going to restore degraded areas. Then the final and most detailed level is to set a target. And here you set a baseline. For example, currently protected areas cover this percentage of our city. And by 2030, our target is to up that to 4% of the city area, for example. Just to mention also that through these different levels, it's voluntary, the commitments, of course. So it's up to each city to choose from the menu of different options to choose which commitments are relevant for them, and also how far along they want to go. So one might choose as a city to say, great, we are committed to protecting, connecting, and restoring ecosystems. We're publicly making that commitment, putting it on the action platform. And we also want to detail some of the action that we take. So we want to share what's our goal to increase protected area coverage. But we don't want to go to the final level and set quantitative targets for that. And there is that flexibility in essence that you can choose how far along the levels you go, and you can also choose from across the different commitments and the different kinds of actions. So from here, I will go and show you what it looks like when you arrive and you first start to make a commitment.
And excuse me, Peter, just a time check. You've got about 5 minutes more, if that's okay.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you.
Steve. Great, so like I explained, there are the different levels. The whole user interface you will see is very user-friendly and practical, and there's guidance throughout. On the left here, you can see where you're tracking in the process. So of the 3 action areas, we're starting out, let's pick protect and restore nature. You get a description of why this is important and what it's about. And then we say, great, okay, we want to start with this action area. Let's go into that. Here we are looking at a preview of the different commitments we can make. So you'll see it covers climate change adaptation and mitigation, pollution, invasive species, conserving and restoring species, and also working with ecosystems. So we're happy with this. We want to make one of these 5 commitments. Otherwise, we can, of course, go back. But let's continue. And let's pick the first commitment that we want to make. Again, you'll see various guidance text, but essentially we've chosen the commitment protect, connect, and restore ecosystems. And we have, again, a preview of under this commitment, what kind of actions we can take. And also importantly, it shows how this aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals and also the 2030 action targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it helps you to understand how these local actions link to the global goals. So we're happy, great. We want to continue and say we'd like to make this commitment. So fantastic. We've shared our commitment overall to protect, connect, and restore ecosystems. And now we can continue and get more specific. So you'll see here different options. For example, looking at connectivity, looking at OECMs, looking at protected areas or restoration, or limiting conversion. Of course, definitions also matter. So you can hover over certain terms like protected areas, and it gives you an internationally recognized definition of what that is. So let's say we want to look at restoration. So we've now made the overall commitment. Now we get more specific and we're taking an action. And the action we'd like to take is to say what our city is currently doing to restore or rehabilitate ecosystems. So we might say here we are developing a city-wide restoration plan, just as an example, but there's space here to share various things. And then we'd like to save this action, and we also want to go now to the final level to set a target. So we've now made a commitment. We've said we're taking this action of working on restoration. And here at the final, most detailed level, you are able to really get into the details and set quantitative targets. So what you see here, for example, is first you want to set your baseline. So it goes into a breakdown of, at the moment, the total extent of terrestrial ecosystems in our city is, for example, so many square kilometers. And what proportion of that is degraded at the moment? So what's the potential for restoration? And similarly, you could do the same for your baseline for freshwater or coastal ecosystems. So that's the current state of play, the baseline. And then critically, we want to set the target for 2030. So this is where you can share what your city aims to do by 2030. So the area that the city would like to restore by then. So we might say it's 2 square kilometers of terrestrial ecosystems. I'm just going to quickly put in some dummy values here so we can go along. And then you're also able to set the date reminder. So part of setting a target is coming back and reporting on your progress and sharing what you're doing. So say, great, we want to come back and receive an email reminder 2 years from now. We want to come share and give an update. You're also able to share a document of proof, which could be it's optional, and it's any kind of, might be your city's restoration plan that you want to upload here to back up what you're sharing. And great, so we've made our commitment, shared our action, we've set the target, and now we can go and make another commitment, for example, on invasive alien species, or on mainstreaming nature in our city, or on nature-based solutions. There's a whole range. But let's say we're done, fantastic. And lastly, just keeping the time in mind, what I'll show you is you have what we're looking at here is our dashboard as a city. And we're able to see all the different commitments that we've made. And if we look at the one we just did now, in terms of restoration, it shows us a nice summary of what action we're taking at the moment, the baseline that we've set, when we set the baseline, the target that we've set. And now we're able to, in future, when we come back, add progress reports, so share an update about what we've done. So this is the one place where it shows up on your own city dashboard, and here you get a summary of different things. Another example here of how our city will increase protected areas. Importantly, also, then there is we call the leaderboard. So this is a summary of what different cities are doing across the platform, and you can search by specific cities. So we see here that if San Antonio in Texas, Glasgow, City of Yarra, that have already made commitments, and we can search by the cities. So I'll just show you.
Peter, I think we might have to finish up there. If that's okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. So just to end off, on your public city profile that we shared previously, we're looking at here at this example of the city from Romania. Your commitments and your actions and your targets also show up on your city profile publicly, and that, of course, is a means for you to inspire other cities to showcase what you're doing. So it gives a summary, for example, of what this city is doing and what kind of targets they've set. So thanks a lot for your attention, and looking forward to the rest of the presentations, and also to take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's an awful lot to try to get through in 20 or 30 minutes, so you've done very well. I mean, we can all see just how complex and complete the Cities with Nature platform is, and I just want to congratulate your team, because I know that there's been a huge amount of work on that in the last 6 months to improve the functionality, and we really saw today how everything's working very smoothly, so fantastic. I won't take questions right now, although Jane reckons very cool. Thank you, Jane. Because I know there are no questions yet in the chat, so I'd like to move on to the city slots, and we can certainly have questions on this at the end of the program. So we have 3 cities. The first just happens to be the City of Melbourne, where I just happen to be sitting, but that is coincidental. And it's my pleasure to introduce Lee Harrison, who's an ecologist at the City of Melbourne, to give us a quick snapshot on some of their initiatives. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Steve. Let me figure out the screen share. We need to play. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about setting and measuring nature targets and some key lessons from the City of Melbourne. I'm not sure I've got lessons, but and first of all, the City of Melbourne respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and the Bunurong Boonwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and pays respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We are committed to our reconciliation journey because at its heart, reconciliation is about strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples for the benefit of all Victorians. So in 2017, the City of Melbourne adopted its first proper nature in the city strategy. And this strategy is part of a suite of strategies that are work together, come together to achieve a number of goals, including cooling the city by 4 degrees, improving livability, resilience, community health and biodiversity. So the nature strategy is just one of many strategies trying to achieve these goals. So the nature in the city strategy has a number of goals and priorities and actions and targets within it. And I'll talk a little bit more about those, but broadly there's the traditional creating a more diverse, connected, resilient natural environment. Second of all, connecting people with nature. And thirdly, demonstrating leadership. So you can read all about those targets in our nature strategy. But how will the City of Melbourne know if it has achieved these goals and targets? So on the Cities with Nature platform, you can find our BMERF, our biodiversity monitoring and evaluation framework. And this is a pretty cool document. I was rereading it today to prepare for this presentation, and it can help you really figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve. So a few definitions that can help you think about these things from the BMERF. This is, everybody probably have a different definition of these things, but in this document, research is defined as a systematic collection and analysis of information or data to increase our understanding of a topic or issue, usually to answer a specific question. So for example, the number of birds in a park would be a research question. Monitoring, on the other hand, is the repeated measurement of an attribute. So that would be the number of birds in a park compared over time to, this year versus last year. So the key difference being it's about repeating it. And you can have projects that are research and monitoring, or they can be one or the other. And trials are question-driven projects, usually based on a conceptual model or hypothesis, and they test the suitability of a product or the performance of a new or modified management approach or a product. So for example, if we plant more shrubs, do we see more small birds? And there's a lot of hypotheses you can test in that question. The other definitions that are briefly touched on in this document is the types of things you might monitor. So the outputs, which are the things produced, built or developed, for example, the number of trees planted or the % canopy cover. So those are the things that we put in place, and these can be pretty easy and quick to monitor and report on. And the second one is the outcomes, which is that really fundamental reason that you're doing it, so the livability. So this is the consequences of the things that you have produced, built or developed. For example, if you're planting trees for temperature reduction or increased livability. I'm just going to run through 2 quick examples of these things. So in our nature strategy, we have a target to increase understory habitat on City of Melbourne managed land by 20% by the end of the strategy 2027. And this is based on a bunch of research that we did with lots of researchers around the city. This is an example, and there's lots of literature on this as well. And it shows that, loads of Indigenous insect species can be found in the mid-story and understory vegetation. So this is a really key thing to improve if we want to improve biodiversity across the city. So we set a target of an output, which is we're trying to increase the area of shrub beds planted compared to a baseline. And the purpose of this is to assess progress towards a target. So this graph here shows that we set our baseline at 0 in 2018. By 2019, we'd got about 4% increase. By 2020, we were about, I don't know, 6%. And then during COVID, we got very busy and we actually beat our 20% target and exceeded our 20% increase in understory vegetation. So that's an example of monitoring and reporting just towards a target of the outputs, which is the things that we're doing. The second example I will talk to you is this monitoring research trial that we've been undertaking in the city. And the purpose of this is to quantify the effectiveness of plantings in streets at increasing biodiversity. So we measured the species richness, the abundance of birds, bees, and butterflies. So this is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So this is a much more complicated thing to measure. So here's a sample of our results for native bees at 2 of our sites. We had 4 sites and 12 control sites. But what we see here is that before we did anything, so the red line is our planting site and the blue line are our control sites. So we've done 2, this is only data for 2 years, but we've done 5. So after and after at Docklands Drive, you can see before there was basically no bees there. And then after our plantings, they started to increase. And then in the second year of monitoring, they had increased a lot more. And the same pattern can be seen at the Park Street planting. So the left-hand side is the abundance, so the number of bees found, and then this, on the right-hand column here is the species richness. So we've seen an increasing number of species at these 2 sites as well. So I think we've detected 34 bee species overall, over majority of which are Indigenous species. And there are lots of things that we're not monitoring. So this picture here is taken from one of our sites. We were monitoring bees, butterflies, but we weren't monitoring beetles or hoverflies. However, they are clearly increasing as well. So those bees and butterflies are really just indicators of our increasing biodiversity at those sites, but we can't really hope to monitor every aspect of biodiversity. So I hope that's been a useful overview of monitoring in a city, and I'll hand back over to our host.
Right. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, really interesting. And obviously, nearly all of that data could just go straight up onto the action platform. So that's really good. We do have a question which we'll come back to later on about potentially moderating the information that goes onto the action platform. But let's keep going with the city snapshots. Let's travel now from Melbourne across to Adelaide. And I'd like to introduce Amy Bruckman from the City of West Torrens. Amy is Environmental Sustainability Officer. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Steve. I'll just get my screen up. Just wait with me for one moment as we get organised here. All right, I might just turn my camera off so that I can see my notes, if that's okay. So yes, thank you, Steve, for that introduction. So I'm Amy Bruckman, Environment Sustainability Officer at the City of West Torrens. For those that don't know or aren't familiar with our city, it's a vibrant area located between the Adelaide Central Business District and the sea, southwest of our state's capital. It's home to more than 60,000 residents, as well as key state infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, recreational facilities, and our state's principal airport for domestic and international flights and freight, which makes up about 20% of our council area, which, when you're managing biodiversity and nature, makes it interesting, the conflict with having such a big industry in the middle of our city. Some fun facts: we have 174 hectares of public open space, 190 rain gardens, and 13% tree canopy cover. So we undertake a lot of community initiatives around environment sustainability in our council area, such as our tree strategy. We have native plant giveaways. We've recently joined Adelaide National Park City. We've undertaken a mapping of all our street trees and trees in our public parks. And yes, have a wide range of initiatives, as you can see. But a really key focus is also climate adaptation. So the City of West Torrens, in partnership with cities of Charles Sturt and Port Adelaide Enfield, which are our neighbouring councils, have undertaken the Adapt West Climate Change Adaptation Plan. And one of the 11 key priorities of this plan is to increase urban greenness and enhance urban green spaces, with an emphasis on the green infrastructure in cooling our city. So as part of this, we undertook urban heat mapping back in 2017. We are currently working with all metropolitan councils and state government to do a repeat of that, with the flyover due to be finished late this week. So we should have some new data soon. So we sought to identify where heat builds up across our city during hot weather. So we also investigated where hotspots and heat islands overlap with vulnerable members of our community. So in Western Adelaide, we have higher rates of vulnerable community members, so those with pre-existing medical conditions relating to renal health, heart health, mental illness. We've seen clear correlation as well during our heat waves, higher hospital admissions and peak hospital admissions for these vulnerable community members. So we really saw that direct relationship between able to use green infrastructure and our tree canopy cover, greening on private open space, as well as a mitigation for reducing the vulnerability of these community members. So undertaking urban heat mapping has also helped us to prioritise where we can undertake greening projects throughout our council. So you'll see here an example of the snapshots from the heat mapping. So it was about 36 degrees on the day of the flyover that we undertook. You can see here as an example, which shows Mile End South, which is one of our suburbs which has extremely low canopy cover and urban greenness, and we were recording temperatures up in the 50s and 60s. So you can imagine, although that is surface temperature, that does influence air temperature as well. It makes it very uncomfortable for people who might be walking, catching public transport, or just trying to keep cool and not use too much artificial cooling. So as part of this as well, we can also, we mapped tree canopy heights. So you can see in the bottom left corner, you can garner information from that mapping, such as you can search for tree canopies with trees that are 3 metres or higher. You can also start to interrogate the health of our urban canopy through the NDVI, which is the Normalised Difference Vegetation Index. So the healthier a plant or a tree is, the more chlorophyll it has, and then that greenness shows up in the mapping. So it's really, we've been able to interrogate a lot of information out of this mapping and use it to inform our projects. So as part of the mapping as well, we did 11 case studies, and one looked at street tree cover. So you can see in this example, we looked at North Street in Henley Beach, which was the most heavily tree-lined street in our study area. So comparing the daytime measurement with surrounding streets, which had little or no tree canopy cover, there was an 8-degree Celsius difference in temperature. So it's quite significant. We also found that nighttime temperatures were cooler in areas with increased urban greening and tree canopy cover as well. Another case study that we looked at was on urban form. So the City of West Torrens is experiencing a lot of increase in urban infill. So we compare in the bottom left corner an older suburb around Henley Beach, typically older houses, bigger back and front yards, more permeable surfaces, more greening in the private open space as well. And compare that to Northgate, which is a high density residential zone, typically what we're starting to see across the western suburbs. And you can just see the difference in that heat. Again, there's not as much opportunity for greening with reduced backyard and private open space size. So we're looking for strategies to kind of help combat that urban heat and finding more creative ways to incorporate urban greening into private open space.
And Amy, we will need to finish up in a sec.
Okay, sorry, I'll rush through. As part of the study as well, we work with Macquarie University to look at the role of urban greening in private open space. And a really key finding from that was that despite covering only 1/5 of urban land, private residential gardens contain more than 40% of tree canopy cover and shrub canopy cover, and more than 30% of herbaceous cover. So I think there's a clear message that we really need to work with our residents to increase greening. We have limited private open space, public open space that we continue to plant into. So as part of that, we've started looking at some key initiatives across our community. And interestingly, as I mentioned before, we're seeing a lot of urban infill, and people are really turning to the verge or nature strip. So it's typically an area outside of front of every house covered with dolomite. And we're seeing a really large interest from our community in greening that space. So council can work with our community to help upgrade that at no cost. So yes, well, thank you for your time. Hope that's interesting. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
That's terrific. Thanks very much, Amy. And I noticed Peter's put a very useful chat in the box there, just saying how some of your heat island work could be very readily uploaded to the action platform. And just for everyone's benefit, we've noticed that quite a number of the Adelaide councils are focusing on the urban heat island as one of their priorities. So moving now over to the East Coast, to our third and final speaker, to Wollongong. My great pleasure to introduce Paul. Paul Tracy is Acting Director of Infrastructure and Works, Open Spaces and Environmental Services. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Steve. 14 slides and not much time. So welcome to Wollongong, Australia's 10th largest city, population of 220,000 people, and bounded by nature. We have the Royal National Park to the north, separating us from Sydney, Lake Illawarra to the south, the Illawarra Conservation Escarpment to the west, and the Pacific Ocean to the east. Our city has been built on the backbone of coal mining and the steelmaking industry. We were one of the largest urban developed cities in the world throughout the 1960s. Loss of riparian zones, and much of our work has been going on in that space for a long time now, but I'll just focus today on some of the things we've been doing in the past 5 years. Lots of planning. We adopted our urban greening strategy that set some ambitious canopy targets in 2017. Our Sustainable Wollongong supporting document guides all of our environmental improvements across the city. Our council adopted a climate emergency in 2019, and coming out of that was our net zero targets in the climate mitigation plan in 2020. And just last month, our council adopted the adaptation plan. I'll talk about lots of action. So the urban greening program, we've measured our city. We have a 17% canopy cover, which is one of the lowest for any of Australia's major cities in our urban areas. And most of those trees are held on private land. We've measured which suburbs suffer from the lowest canopy as well, and we've targeted our programs to focus in those highest need areas. We have a strong focus on shading our streets. We partner with residents, so our arborists will go and assess suitable species and give residents options to pick what trees they would like in front of their homes. We align our programs for street tree shading along shared pathways, and we're investing significant capital expenditure in our town and village precinct upgrades with things such as the image there, which is a structured soil vault, which will ensure that trees can grow to their full potential with the space they need under the ground. Shading our parks is obviously a key focus as well. So large semi-mature trees that will throw shade for 80 plus years. shading areas that provide access to amenities and facilities. And the first 4 years of that program, we provided natural shade to 55 of our local level playgrounds across the city. Similar to West Torrens, we've developed verge garden guidelines. Obviously, the road reserve or the council-owned land fronting people's homes is our largest land holding in the city, and we want to see that greened up. So utilities above ground power lines and below ground services obviously create challenges with getting trees everywhere in that area. So this verge garden guideline fills a void. If we can't get a tree, we'll go for vegetation on the ground. We've gone one step further. We don't regulate this in any way. We just set a guideline with parameters, and we even fund this through grant programs for residents to get funding for these projects to get free plants. The role of our botanic garden I find interesting in this space. There's 108 local government managed botanic gardens in Australia, and most of them sit primarily as parks for recreation use. Wollongong actually does a lot of work in ex situ plant conservation, which makes a contribution to the global strategy for plant conservation. And this is really something that I think local government botanic gardens can play a supporting role to the largest state and federal government agencies. So just a few picks there. The Pomaderus walshii, for example, is a species found in our escarpment, less than 40 known plants left in the wild. So conserving that species in our botanic garden is critical. Some of the other programs we've adapted, we've been really adaptive with the community. Obviously lockdowns with the pandemic and being able to do essential exercise throughout last year really changed the focus of our horticulture teams. And this has been a key part of our program ever since, is meeting the communities really appreciated the colour, the habitat boxes, and the increased biodiversity that those projects bring throughout the city. We've tried to be really innovative in the way that we promote our programs. So what better way to promote a tree than to have a tree billboard? So these things pop up throughout the city with some pretty quirky messages about the benefits of trees. And we actually put gift tags on some of our bigger trees that tell some messages, some broader climate messages. Partnering with community champions has been another key factor to our success in rolling out urban greening. Nobody really wants to hear from a local government arborist about trees. They want to hear from the people they know in the community. So we work with community champions, and they door knock and talk to their neighbours about the benefits of trees, and we've had tremendous success in that space. Tree vandalism, it's not all good news, I guess. This was some tea trees in one of our key foreshore reserves that for 50 years these trees have been climbed up by kids, and last year a vandal destroyed those trees, as you can see in the image. And it's something that lots of councils deal with. Normally you see a big ugly sign that goes up asking for information for vandalism. We took a bit of a different approach to this one because there was a massive outpouring of grief. So we told those stories in this space, and those big billboards now have personal connections to those trees. So it's just a different approach we've taken. This is kind of something that we've been working on recently, how we respond to problematic conflicts. So there's 42 illegal mountain bike trails in Wollongong at the moment. They're often in sensitive riparian areas where we see trees destroyed and understory cleared. So we've actually gone out into those areas and we've built tracks in open space areas for the kids. That's primarily young kids and teenagers that build these tracks, and we work with them with expert mountain bike designers to build them in spaces where they won't cause environmental damage. What else Wollongong's working on right now? On the left, we've got koala conservation plantations happening in partnership with local zoos, where we'll provide food source plantations for those programs. We're using the tiny forest projects, which is based on the Japanese Miyawaki reforestation technique, And really these projects are living billboards that we work with school kids on to plan out, and they're popping up all over the city. And the images on the right aren't real clear, but we've got lots of open space in a changing climate that's just too hot. There's no shade. So we've got a transitional landscape program which will see a reduction of 30% of mown areas and replaced with canopy cover and understory plantings over the next 20 years. That's really it for me. So thank you.
Oh, is that all, Paul?
I hope so.
It's amazing you got through so much. Well done. And yeah, great story and interesting reality checks too, some of the downsides that we have to deal with. So thank you for that. Look, I noticed there's a fantastic dialogue going on in the chat function. And I know we're going to run out of time soon. Just a quick question to Jessica or Dustin. Can we print off the chats and send them to all the participants? I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for answering that. That's terrific. Look, I also wondered whether Ingrid would like to make a quick comment, because as I said before, she's the head of the city's biodiversity centre. She's been putting some interesting comments into the chat function anyway. But Ingrid, if you're still there, and I think you are, would you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, would you like to make any sort of summing up, wrapping up type comments?
Absolutely. I just want to say I'm absolutely stunned. I think that this has been really interesting. We've got some incredible examples of what cities are doing. And as I've said, you know, I managed to grab just some of the ideas. We certainly want to share some of these resources, and Peter and his team will get back to the various cities that we've got here so that we can share the best practices, the lessons, if there are any guides, any of those sorts of things with other cities. One of the things that we're thinking of doing, I think it was West Torrens that had that example of the mapping. We're going to be doing some work on mapping. We've done some interesting work on mapping in Africa, and we wanted to share that with the rest of the world. So it'll be really great if we can do a proper global South one and have Australia and Africa mapping examples. And we haven't quite decided yet whether that'll be a little guide or whether it's going to be a webinar series or what, but and I'm sure there's many more examples. But the other thing I just wanted to say is that listening to these amazing stories and examples that we've had shared today is, I realized how much there is that we can include within the action platform. And one of the ideas with the action platform, which is why we didn't just leave it to the CBD's action agenda or one of the many other sorts of pledges and things that one can make at a political level, is because there is so much good work that's already happening at the city level that is not really being taken up into the country reporting system. And where the result is what one sees is that you have a very skewed picture of what's happening, simply because in many countries, and I'm not saying that Australia is a case in point, but in many countries, there isn't always the capacity at the national level to gather all that information. So it's really important, and I want to encourage not just these 3 cities and Yarra City Council that have been participating through presentations in the webinar today, but as many cities as possible in Australia to use this action platform. You don't have to go through the whole 21 list of action, action areas. If your interest is particularly around greening or, whatever the case may be, invasive alien species, I know is a big thing in your part of the world, as in South Africa, that is sufficient, and again, the way in which the platform has been set up is that you don't have to go down to that deep level of detail. It's an iterative process, and you can be selective and you can choose how much detail you share. And just to say, I think that it was our last city presentation now from the city of Wollongong, that I was interested to see the amount of horticultural work that's coming into your some of the initiatives that you shared with us. And one of the partners in Cities with Nature is actually the international, what do they call them, AIPH. I'm not quite sure what the acronym stands for, but it's the horticultural producers. So if you're interested in connecting with these people, I know that they run amazing programs. They've got an award system going at the moment that we're participating in. And if the City of Wollongong, or for that matter, any other city is interested to know more, please do pop us an email. You can contact us via Steve, and we can put you in touch, because that's something else that we do. It's a sort of a benefit or a service that we offer through Cities with Nature, if you are not already connected, obviously. So yes, I'm so inspired today, and I'm very impressed by the amazing things, the great diversity, and often it's such simple ideas, but the impact that they have, I think is really fantastic, particularly given the fact that there's so much biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation. Even in a city where you have a very strong link to mining and industrialism, for example, you see these incredible initiatives taking place. Thanks.
Thanks, Ingrid. And look, your last point about the horticultural industry. In fact, here in Australia, we have formed a partnership with, it's called Greener Spaces, Better Places, and it's actually sponsored and funded by the horticultural industry of Australia. And they've already participated with us on, I think it's one webinar, and they'll be working with us on our next webinar. And I was going to put in just a quick commercial. We're planning our next webinar for mid-year, probably June, in partnership with Greener Spaces. You may recall last year in November, we looked at the first part of greening private properties, greening the private realm, mainly looking at it from the point of view of how to incentivise the community to increase the greening on their properties. The second webinar will be like part two, looking at the regulatory barriers, carrot and stick type mechanisms which can be used to drive greening of private property. That's sort of the end of our program, but we're very happy to stay online for a bit. We've still got lots of people online, and very happy for anyone who'd like to now turn their camera on, turn their microphone on and make a contribution, make a comment, ask a question, because that's what we're here for. Who'd like to say something?
I think we do have a question from Jane Toner, a recent one added into the chat. Jane, do you want to come off mute, or would you like me to? So Jane's, oh, there we go, Jane.
Oh yeah, hi, sorry. Yeah, I'm working on a project with, actually Alan Roger is here as well. And we're working with the Architecture Institute and the Landscape Architecture Institute nationally and globally. And we're looking at a project called Indigenous Ecosystem Corridors and Nodes. And so we're quite interested in that connectivity of biodiversity between the nodes that are being created. So I was wondering if these very inspiring cities that we've heard from, if they have this sort of mapping going on about corridors and nodes for wildlife, how we can create a network that goes globally.
I might do a quick response to that first, Jane. Last year, one of our webinars was looking specifically at how local governments can work more effectively with their Indigenous owners, their traditional owners. We didn't look too much at the issue of connectivity and corridors, but certainly one of our active members, the City of Mount Barker in the hills outside of Adelaide, is doing quite a lot of work on that. Not necessarily yet with their Indigenous people, but we've actually flagged that for further webinars and research. Very happy to talk to you offline about that one too. But in case anyone else now would like to respond to that question, any of the three presenters have any comments on Indigenous links, connectivity? Okay, well, let's talk about that offline, Jane. Just drop us a line. Yeah,
and I can see that Lee's posted some resources and those sorts of things there in the chat too. So,
right. Okay. Yeah, the line's still open. If anyone else would like to put their hand up or say a few words. Sounds like we're just about done. I think there's a lot of very rich interchange on the chat function, so we'll certainly print that up and distribute that. So if there are no further bids, I'm going to knock this down in a moment, going. Look, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. I think we agree. It was only just the tip of the iceberg. It's sort of tantalising and a bit of a teaser. But two things, please reach out to other people who attended the webinar today if you want to follow up on particular good ideas. Please look closely at the platform, as Peter explained it to us so well. And we will now be contacting all of the councils who are sort of formally working with us in the Cities with Nature community to talk to you individually about what you want to do now in terms of using the platform more effectively. And we're developing up further webinar programs. That's how you can get in touch with us, either by the websites or by emailing ICLEI Oceania. And I think that's about it. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.